I would like you to consider some scenarios surrounding a student's assignment and then decide if the student committed an act of academic dishonesty. Now please make note of your thoughts so you can refer to it later. A student has submitted a paper and a plagiarism checking tool reports that it is an 80% match to a paper that was previously submitted by the same student in another class. The paper was modified to meet all of the requirements of your assignment. However, because an instructor of another course had submitted the original version of the paper to the plagiarism checking tool in its database, it was flagged. Had it not been for this, you would have given the paper an A. Do you consider this cheating? After administering an online test where you used a test bank created by the publisher of your textbook, a student emails you that another student claimed to have had a copy of the test bank prior to taking the test. You follow up and discover that the student legally purchased the instructor's version of the textbook from a major online retailer. Do you consider this cheating? You assign a series of problems derived from several resources for students to solve during the week. Prior to the due date, a student posts in the class discussion board that they had Googled the assignment and found where an instructor at another university has posted a step-by-step solutions guide for the problems you had assigned. Do you consider this cheating? You assigned a paper in the class, and on the due date, a student posts in the course discussion board how great another student's paper was. Later it becomes known that the students had exchanged papers so they could proofread each other's paper prior to submitting them for grading. Do you consider this cheating? You have a 200-question final exam that you give the students a week to complete. A student in the discussion board posts that they are having difficulty with numbers 38 through 45 and that they would like someone to explain to them how to answer those questions. Do you consider this cheating? An interesting point to bring up is that in each of these scenarios, I can easily argue that the student is cheating. However, I can also logically argue that they are not cheating. Everyone has a different point of view. You, me, and your students all see things differently. Some of our students commit acts of cheating by accident. This happens because the instructions were not clear to them as what they were expected to do, and they are only guided by their previous experiences. These experiences are not solely from academic settings, but from cultural settings as well. Therefore, we need to clearly communicate our definition of academic dishonesty to the students so that they understand what is allowed and what is not allowed. Let's start with the act that happens more often than any other act of dishonesty. The easiest way for a student to gain an unfair advantage over other students in regards to an assignment is to ask for more time based on a deception. Often students will claim that they, a friend, or a family member was sick. Another claim is that a family member or a friend died, was giving birth, or got married. Technology is also another excuse. You might hear claims that the system was down or their computer was not working, etc. In online courses, you could have students out of state, and they may claim that severe weather like tornadoes and hurricanes were an issue, knowing that you would not know exactly where they live and whether they were really affected by the weather. Car trouble is also a popular excuse. To quote the provost's website on this topic, plagiarism is using another's words, ideas, materials, or work without properly acknowledging and documenting the source. Even if a student changes a sentence by changing a few words around or paraphrases, they still must cite the work. Often, a student commits plagiarism because they did not know how to properly cite their sources. In many other instances, a student has copied and pasted material from the internet and failed to cite their sources. More often than not, they did not even know they had to cite such material. When a student hires someone to do their homework, take a test, or write a paper for them, this is considered impersonation. The difference between impersonation as opposed to plagiarism or deception is that impersonation often involves an attempt by the student to have someone else represent them as the student. Essentially, the student is trying to outsource the assignment to someone else. Sometimes a student will fudge the numbers in an assignment or create a data set instead of actually collecting data, and these are examples of fabrication. However, a more common occurrence is when a student creates a bibliography for a writing assignment of papers and resources that they did not read or use when writing the paper. This is something that might occur more in a campus environment than an online one because the act involves destroying or damaging a shared resource. Often print journal articles or library books for key assignments would go missing. In the online environment, this act is much harder to commit because it would involve disabling the learning management platform or other related technologies. Every so often, you'll have a student that will not do any work in a group project. They assume that whatever the grade the group gets on an assignment, they will also get, even if they do not do their fair share. Students that engage in this form of academic dishonesty are trying to receive credit for work that they did not do. When a student reuses a previous assignment, either in part or in whole, and submits it a second time, this is considered double dipping. Now, in some courses, reusing work from a previous assignment is considered efficient and is encouraged, like in cumulative projects. That makes this a gray area because unless you have defined this in your syllabus as inappropriate conduct, a student might complain that they only reused their own work and they should not be penalized for it. I include cyberbullying on this list because it is something that we might have to deal with, and it is definitely a violation of the Student Code of Conduct. The anti-bullying activist Bill Belsley defines cyberbullying as the use of information and communication technologies to support deliberate, repeated, and hostile behavior by an individual or group that is intended to harm others. This type of behavior has no room in the educational environment and can be directed at other students in the class or faculty in an attempt to intimidate them into bending to the cyberbully's will. Specifying which resources your students can and cannot use is a difficult thing to do. More often than not, we choose to limit what a student can use as a resource when they take a test because that's easier than outright banning certain resources for the entire course. Generally, students are banned from using their textbook or notes when taking a closed book test, but this can also include the sharing of test questions and answers with students, as well as illegally obtaining a copy of the exam ahead of time. I hope this list of acts of academic dishonesty and cheating did not leave you depressed, but you need to be aware of these acts to provide clear guidance to your students as to what is and what is not permissible. We often assume that everyone understands these things by default, but that is not the case. In the beginning of the presentation, I asked you to consider a number of scenarios. When I present these scenarios to a group, often the group is evenly split on every case. If faculty have various opinions on what is and is not considered academic dishonesty, then we should assume our students will not clearly understand either. This is why we need to define what acts constitutes academic dishonesty.